Who will be the next Labour leader? There are 5 in the field, with the latest poll putting shadow Brexit Secretary Sir Keir Starmer significantly ahead. His shadow business counterpart, Rebecca Long-Bailey, in second. The start of a 10-week campaign, and the contenders were all smiles. But this is a party divided by Brexit, by the outgoing leader Jeremy Corbyn, by the legacy of Tony Blair. Can any of these candidates somehow weave the party back together?
Don't trust the last Labour government. And don't trust the last 4 years, because what Jeremy Corbyn brought to this party, he made us an anti-austerity party that stood against cuts.
But if Sir Keir Starmer plays the unity card, Rebecca Long-Bailey is the champion of the left.
I've lived through the 40 years of deindustrialisation that we've seen, and that child from Old Trafford who watched her family struggle is angry. Her life was nearly shattered, and now she's here to shatter the Tory majority. And we do that through our movement, we do that through our communities, and we do that through ambition of our principles. An aspirational socialist government.
Whoever wins will of course need the charisma to mix it up with Boris Johnson. Emily Thornberry has been a feature of Labour's front bench for nearly a decade now.
I shadowed Boris Johnson for 2 years when he was Foreign Secretary, and during those 2 years I was toe-to-toe with him, and frankly he didn't like it. We need to be able to hold him to account. He is, in the end, a liar. He is callous. He doesn't care. He plays at politics. He plays with people's lives. He needs to be held to account.
Accountability comes in many forms, though, and Jess Phillips said Labour too had questions to answer about anti-Semitism, suggesting she had stepped up while others hadn't.
The Labour Party needs a leader who has spoken out against anti-Semitism and other forms of harassment, in fact, when others were keeping quiet, and somebody who was in the room struggling for an independent system, lots and lots of meetings. I have to say, I don't remember some of the people here being in that particular room or being in those particular fights.
And Lisa Nandy, the Remainer in a Leave seat, who says she understands Labour's challenge better than most.
My Leave voting constituents are no more racist little Englanders than my friends who voted Remain are liberal elitists. And we should never allow the Tories to do that, to divide us, young against old, citizen against migrant, north against south, town against city. We have got to raise our game.
A YouGov survey of Labour members suggests if the ballots were concluded today, Starmer would win the first round on 46%, Long-Bailey second on 32%. And after the final round of counting, with Phillips, Thornberry and Nandy eliminated, Starmer would end up leader on 63%. Labour members are also choosing their next deputy leader.
Are we ready for some more?
But popular with the grassroots doesn't necessarily mean popular with the wider electorate. And if Labour are going to be reborn, they need to persuade voters in the deindustrialised north who went Tory to come back.
There's no point us choosing a leader who makes the tribe we already are feel happy and good amongst ourselves. We need to increase the size of our tribe. We need to understand that our people is everyone. It's not just the current members of the Labour Party. We've got to persuade people who voted Conservative to vote Labour, to lend us their vote.
Labour have just under 5 years to rebuild before the next general election. Who will lead them into battle?
Well, earlier I spoke to Professor of Politics and polling expert Sir John Curtis. Now, we started off talking about the voters Labour had lost at the last election, particularly those northern working-class constituencies. And I asked him whether it was basically all about Brexit.
It isn't just Brexit, but it certainly is. I mean, the movement since 2015 is a lot to do with Brexit. Essentially, the Conservative votes become much more of a Leave vote. I mean, back in 2015, the Conservatives only had the support of around 45% of those who went on to vote Leave. That figure is now close to 75%. Labour, conversely, has lost pretty much half of the 30% or so of the Leave vote that it had in 2015. So Brexit undoubtedly is part of the story. That said, the longer term story is also to do with New Labour, because there's quite a lot of evidence out there now that the Labour Party was losing working class votes in particular before 2015, not necessarily to the Conservatives at that point, in many cases just simply staying at home.
And is the public just sick of Brexit now? Does it want it to go away after it happens?
Well, on the way, and yes, there's a sense in which we are undoubtedly fed up about the fact that it's gone off so long, though that, frankly, is a view that's much more common amongst Leave voters than Remain voters. I think another $64,000 question to which we don't know the answer is the extent to which that sense of I'm a Remainer, I'm a Leaver, which is now really quite widespread in the electorate, whether that is going to dissipate once at least we've sorted out our long-term relationship with the European Union, or whether actually that debate is going to continue. I don't think we can be sure. It may be that those identities remain with us and that therefore Brexit continues to be something that shapes the way in which people think about politics and the way in which they may still be voting in the next election.
But as Labour tries to plan its return to power, are you saying that its only way back is to recapture those northern Brexity, more working class voters that it lost? Or is there another coalition of more southern Remainery voters who it could go for instead?
Well, I mean, that I think is essentially the choice that the party potentially faces, in that we can't necessarily assume that the party is going to be able to find it particularly easy to recover the working class vote, and we certainly can't necessarily assume that trying to focus on young people and graduates and a more Remainery social liberal message won't work for the party. There are potential downsides with both strategies. The difficulty with going for the young Remain folk is there is clearly potential competition from the Liberal Democrats, who are also, insofar they've got straight...
Aren't they dead?
The Democrats are not dead. They got 14% of the vote, and their vote is very exclusively virtually a Remain vote. It's very much in Remain areas in the south of England. So just the kind of place... And although they can't win in that part of the world, they can take votes in that part of the world and make it difficult for the Labour Party to congregate amongst that group. The difficulty with the alternative strategy of focusing on the votes that Labour lost is that the votes of a lot of people the Labour Party lost are the votes of older people who will not, frankly, necessarily be in the electorate in 10, 15, 20 years' time. And there will be a fundamental question facing the Conservative Party is what does it do when the Leave electorate that it's got, which is very heavily amongst older people, is no longer part of the electorate. There are also, of course, new potential divisions in the labour market coming down the track, particularly as a result of artificial intelligence. Now, how does the Labour Party respond to that? Again, be aware the agenda will move on. The climate change is clearly going to be crucial. Possible changes to the labour market should be crucial, and therefore thinking in terms of, well, the groups we've lost in the past may not actually be the important question. The important question may well be, how do we position this party, given where it now is, and it is no longer a party that's particularly strong amongst the working class, how, given that fact, should it position itself on some of these new issues that are coming down the track, as well as perhaps the continuing battle about Brexit?
So what's your professional advice to Labour members as they choose a leader?
At least the question I would suggest that Labour members want to think about is, yes, you will want somebody who reflects your views, but also think about that if your views are going to be reflected in government, you need to look for evidence about whether any of these candidates can reach out to the wider public. And at the moment, I don't think there is sufficient evidence that any of them necessarily win on that criterion, and that one of the crucial things in the next 3 months will be the polling on would you be more or less likely to vote for Labour if it's Keir Starmer as leader or Rebecca Long-Bailey or whatever. The answer to that question at the moment, we don't know.
John Curtis, thank you very much.
You're welcome.